followed the horrendous increase in oil prices and so on and so forth. We were very aware that if you once find yourself with no alternative but to go to the IMF for minimum levels of foreign exchange for survival, that once you get into that, you're going to get into a very difficult situation in which there will be unending pressures on you to dismantle all the things that you think are socially important and so on and so forth. And so, in our own case, I'm trying to remember the dates, beginning in early 1977, which was our crunch year. You either had to go to the IMF or find some way of being able to not go to the IMF. Bear in mind, this is a country literally beginning to unravel because it cannot finance what it needs to import from abroad. And we embarked on a very ambitious, enterprising, optimistic program of trying to see if we could go a path of extreme self-reliance with extreme internal austerity, and maybe in 3 or 4 years, literally kickstart agricultural development and all sorts of things to a point where we could get by. And after we had worked on that for months, there still was, all the economists working on it had to come and say, but when you're finished with all of this, you're going to have still a serious foreign exchange gap for about the first 3 to 5 years. Of course, there were voices that said, well, forget it. And one would say, well, you know, if you forget it, you realize, one, we're going to shut down every hospital. You're going to virtually shut down the educational system. You're certainly going to lay off every manufacturing sector worker in the country because all of them use foreign exchange to import the raw materials to keep the factories running. That is that old type of economic development of the 1950s. And, you know, I had the view, and still have it, that you could not embark on a program that would virtually grind the country to a halt and would certainly put tens of thousands of workers onto the street because you couldn't even bring in the raw materials to keep their factories running. But we still thought we have to find a way to plug the foreign exchange gap and not have to go to the IMF. And we tried 2 major routes. The first thing that we thought of was that the people who are benefiting from the oil price increase, who were the OPEC countries, now were the repository of zillions, I forget what the word is beyond billion, whatever that one is, trillions of dollars of reserves. Saudi Arabia, they were swimming in money. Kuwait, swimming in money. The whole of the OPEC world was awash in money. And we in Jamaica hit upon the idea, not for us alone, but embarked upon a mission throughout the OPEC countries to say, if you would set aside a small fraction of your enormous oil earnings, you could supply a source of development finance for the third world. And you know, those you near Africa, the bulk could be for Africa, those in this part of the world more for the Caribbean. And you could not bring us an IMF-type bankers enforcer, but we would be prudent, tough, plan carefully, never waste money, all the conditions you want to lay down. But you could change the world by providing the development finance. We could not get the time of day. I think 2 countries in the whole world showed any interest, Algeria and Venezuela, and they were 2 of the smallest. The Arab oil producers, forgive me, they wouldn't even look at us. They were only too happy to be buying the Dorchester Hotel in London, buying Pan American World Airways, and recycling the whole of the money back into the West. And they broke the whole of the potential power of the third world because they had not the vision or the caring to see another way to do it. We failed. We're left with one possible route. Could we prevail upon the Soviet Union to lend us some money? Because we were no part of any anti-Soviet hysteria. We were friends of Cuba. We were sturdy democratic, not of the communist world. But, we were non-aligned. We were honorably in the non-aligned movement. And I remember at the time, Fidel Castro warned us that we wouldn't get any, but we tried. We sent a mission to Moscow, and they're not interested. So when we came back from those two things, we now had to face the nitty-gritty. And that is how we eventually felt that we just had no alternative but to turn to the IMF. That's how it actually happened. Let's now look at how how the mechanics of this actually work. All the countries in the world virtually are members of the IMF. You so automatically, and of the World Bank and the rest of it. And so if you finally come, as we did, to the conclusion, much as we hate this, we think we have to go because we just can't move without the money. What happens is you make a formal application to the board of the IMF through its managing director, who is, of course, in Washington. They then name a team headed by somebody that they choose from their staff. And they have a number of members of their staff who are what they call IMF team negotiators. That is, they go to a country to sit down with the Ministry of Finance of that country and work out an agreement. You will have made an application for a loan. They are coming to tell you what you must do before you can get that loan. That's what happens. Now they come. And the first thing they do is they'll sit down with your Minister of Finance, your Financial Secretary, and your financial team of the government. And they take out the budget, your annual budget, and they begin to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. They then go to your central bank and say, let's look at your cash flow of receipts for exports and payments out for imports over so many years. And they all work together and fine-tune, examine all of that. When that is finished, they then say to you, in effect, to get the loan, we're going to want a 3-year program. And the 3-year program will look partly at your foreign exchange expenditures, because you will not be able to afford to do more than whatever. And then we're going to look at your local budget. And we're going to cut that, because if you have money spending in your local budget, that money all represents a demand for something to be imported from abroad, although you get it as a J dollar here for Jamaica. Once it's in the pocket of the people, that is potential demand for whether wheat or a car. They're looking at two sides to it. Everything that you might spend represents demand in the pocket of the people. So they put tremendous pressure for everything to be cut. On the other side, to make sure that there is nothing surplus left that could demand a tractor from abroad or a motor car or a sewing machine, they then look at the taxation side. And they say you must increase your taxes to the point where every dollar that you're going to spend is going to be matched with taxation. Now, what they will have found is a situation where there's quite a lot of deficit financing, and certainly every American citizen is familiar with deficit financing. Your politics talks about nothing but deficit financing anywhere in the last 5 years. And you can imagine if you have had to have deficits as a big developed country like the United States, how much more a little country like Jamaica, coming out of all its problems and its background in colonialism. So they will look at you and say, your deficit is now so-and-so. It is to be eliminated by, say, 3 years from now or 4 years from now. So there's a draconian pressure to increase taxes and reduce expenditure so the deficit will disappear. Because the deficit is the margin of demand for imports from abroad. So you see the way they link the two things together. In the end, what happens? You fight, your ministers fight, your cabinet fights, perhaps your prime minister takes 2 or 3 trips up to Washington to see the managing director and say the country cannot stand this thing being done that quickly. We're going to fall apart at the seams. Sorry. No accommodation, no compromise. And they just look at you and said, our business is to see that you're not in debt any longer. We have no other interest. And so, in the end, you face the same choice as when you were looking at going to the OPEC countries or to see if you could borrow it in Russia. You either get the money or you don't. And they don't quarrel about it. They say, no problem if you don't want the money. That's your problem. But if you want it, that's what you're going to do. And so that was the experience. And it has set Jamaica's progress back at least 50 years. The most agonizing part of all of this is the social cost. In a funny way, there are 2 costs. One's social, one's economic. The social cost is the agonizing one. Because in fact, when you are forced to cut our budget so rapidly, so draconianly, it is not as if you are cutting it in a country that has splendid hospitals. That means if a man is ill, his wife has a bed beside the man so that she can stay with him when he's coming out of his operation. Or in which you have schools that are dripping with computers and this, where every family has a garage with at least 1 car in it. You are talking about a poor country with a lot of poverty and terrible shortage of capacity in your infrastructure to deal with human suffering and human need. And so there's no way I could describe to you what is the consequence of these things in terms of the increase in human suffering, where you do your best to sort of walk a tightrope, save what you can, protect what you can, substitute cheaper ways of doing things, employ self-reliance in your society as much as you can. But the truth is you're taking a social beating. And that's the simple fact. Now, what does that social beating mean? It means that more and more you're caught in the crisis, which I describe in this way. The development of a country is to a large extent driven by the will and the faith of the people. If the people believe in what is taking place, then you can ask for certain sacrifices. They will bring a certain attitude to their work, to productivity. The nation can become part of a great national endeavor. When the consequence of this is nothing but retreat and defeat at all the social levels to which people relate that are part of their experience, what you're also doing is undermining the will and capacity of the people to make that extra effort, which is the human part of development. Quite separately, of course, you also find that you put such pressure even on the economic system, that the economic system finds it very hard to generate any kind of internal capital for development, because that has to come from surpluses. Now, they have a slick answer. But if you get enough foreign capital, you'll get all the capital development money that you need. And my answer always is, well, will you tell me how the whole world is going to get this development capital through foreign private sources one time? It cannot be equitable. What am I going to be required to do to make foreign capital feel not safe in Jamaica, because it's always safe in Jamaica, but that it can take out its money so fast, make profits so quick, that it's worth it to come? You see where you're even in a catch-22 from that point of view. And in the end, you struggle. You survive, and much, much suffering later, I suppose you slowly begin to come out the other end. But the country that comes out is nothing like the country that it could have been. Oh yeah, there's no question about that. You see, they begin within a strict form of capitalist ideology, which is contemptuous of issues like sovereignty, contemptuous of that kind of thing. And therefore to them, they are doing their work, their duty. If the pressures that they put force you to a greater dependence on foreign capital, and because of the way that foreign capital comes in and how it relates to the global economy, it incorporates you within what you would call a global capitalist economy. There's no question about that. And what's more, I bet you'd find they're quite unapologetic about it, saying that's in your best interest. I don't know whether they'd be frank enough to say that, but I know that's what they'd think.